May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, incarnate one. Bright star maker, travel with us through Advent. Shine into our unlighted corners. Lead us into ways of justice. Warm us with joy and wonder, and bring us to you. Now, what if you woke up one morning to find that your life and the life of your community was about to radically change? That all your debts would be forgiven, that you'd be free from bondage, that if you were without basic needs, you would soon have housing, and food, and clothing, and care, and that the land that you toiled on could rest as could you. What a profound message. What a message of hope and of joy. And that is exactly the message proclaimed by the prophet Isaiah to the people of Israel in our reading today from Isaiah. Isaiah, who is said to have worn a garment of animal skin and a belt of leather, as did John the Baptist, cries out, "The Spirit of God is upon me, because God has anointed me." So in this moment, Isaiah recognizes and accepts the presence of the God in his life and the life of the people in his responsibility and his authority to speak. Then Isaiah goes on to say, God has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners, and to proclaim the year of God's favor and the day of our God, to comfort all who mourn. Such nice, uplifting words and a powerful prophecy. But really, what did it have to do with the Israelites, and what does it have to do with us? Let's look at the backstory of it. There's a phrase in Isaiah's prophecy that we might miss, and if we do, we miss the meaning of what he's talking about. Isaiah says that he has come to proclaim the year of God's favor. Proclaim the year of God's favor. So what Isaiah is referencing is the year of the Jubilee, which roughly translated means shout for joy. A Jubilee was announced by the blowing of the shofar, the ram's horn, on the first day of the year. And the term Jubilee year, a proclamation, is the year of God's favor, and it's first noted in Leviticus. It's determined by the counting of 7 times 7 years equals 49 years, and the 50th year is the Jubilee. Leviticus says, "You shall make the 50th year your holy, and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants." But there was one catch, and it was a big one. A Jubilee could only take place when the people were on holy land, a place that God created for them, the land given to God's chosen people. So there were no Jubilees for the years of the diaspora, when the people were scattered all over. So the Jubilee God calls for through Isaiah happens after the Israelites are no longer in exile. They're in the promised land in a time of great potential, grace, and responsibility. Here's the other thing about Isaiah's prophecy. Well, God calls for the Jubilee, and Isaiah proclaims it. God nor Isaiah could implement a Jubilee by themselves. So without the action of God's chosen people, without their being in good relationship with God, without the people having their feet and their souls firmly planted on holy ground, debts couldn't be forgiven. People could not be free from bondage, and the needs of the poor could not be met, and the land and those who toil on it could not rest. So for Isaiah's prophecy to have meaning, for it not just to be words, the people around him, all the people had to embrace God's plan to make that Jubilee happen. Isaiah proclaims the good news of the Jubilee, but the people guided by God's grace, are called to make it a reality by shaping the future for what was to come, the new age for the people of God. Now, this isn't a fairy tale or a nice story of God providing for God's people by God taking care of it. Because remember, the Israelites had entered into a covenant of mutuality with God. So, in keeping with that, God lays out the vision and offers the opportunity and grace for a true jubilee to occur. That universal shout out of joy. And committing to making that jubilee a reality takes the work of the whole community. It meant having hard conversations and challenging the social, religious, and economic norms and practices of the times. I think that this reading from the prophet Isaiah, his message from God, his prophecy, is as relevant today as it was in the time of Isaiah. And in fact, we hear this message repeated in the gospel today. We're told that John came to testify to the light. He says he isn't Isaiah, he says he isn't Messiah, but he does say, I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord, just as the prophet Isaiah said. Because in the coming of Jesus begins a time of jubilee, a shout out for joy, the coming of the incarnate one, who leads us out of exile and bondage and oppression. Jubilee, a year of God's favor, a shout out for joy. John's message, like Isaiah's, is a message of hope and a call to preparation and action. And it requires the peoples of John's time to prepare the way, to get ready. And it also requires the people of our time, not only to prepare the way for Jesus, but also to lead the way for Jesus. Professor of homiletics Valerie Bridgman says that Isaiah, John, and Jesus all preach the message that oppressed people receive good news, and broken-hearted people have their wounds tended, and those captive, and here I would imagine captive in any way from oppressive systems and injustice and addictions and more, are liberated, and prisoners are free. Now, can't you hear the cheers arising from those set free under all these conditions? A jubilee. But remember, we are called to birth Jesus into the world and then to be Christ in the world. So like the Israelites in the time of Isaiah, Christ as the jubilee, the shout out of joy, requires much of us. It's a new way of ensuring that everyone is included in God's favor, brought about by Christ's birth and death and resurrection. I don't know about you, but I always feel this tension about what Christ asks of me and what I need to leave behind and what I want to look forward to. So I think the challenges for us as followers of Jesus are these. As individuals and as a faith community, what does it mean to bring about the year of God's favor, the times of jubilee, the joy in the world? Where are the signs of hope in our present time? How are each of us, and as a community, being called to be that prophetic voice, a prophetic voice of prophetic people? And what do each of us need to leave behind to prepare the way and lead the way of Jesus to the world? And what if we focus on grace over judgment? And what if joy wasn't brought about by materialism but through justice? And what if black and brown lives indeed matter? And what if we welcomed refugees and felt the justice and joy of keeping families together? And what if we shared wealth in the spirit of abundance instead of scarcity? And what if housing and food and medical care and clean water and a living wage were human rights instead of social and economic words of Isaiah and the actions of Jesus, the Spirit of God is upon us. And God has sent us to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners, and to proclaim the year of God's favor, and to comfort all who mourn. Justice and joy, jubilee.